Hi guys, it's time to do another ranking video, and I realized earlier today it's been quite some time since I've done this, and usually what I do is when I'm done kind of reviewing a palette, I'll just put it on the side because I know that I'm going to be making these videos, and I didn't realize how big my pile has gotten. So I think I have 14 palettes today that we're going to be ranking. Usually I try to stick to like 10, but sometimes it just ends up being more. And I was trying to rank these palettes just now, and I had such a hard time, and I just have to make a disclaimer in the beginning of the video that there's only one palette in this bunch that I wouldn't recommend to everybody, but I still think that somebody likes this palette. And all the other palettes here are really nice quality, and I did not want to rank these. And like I said, all of these palettes are really nice, except for one that I just didn't like. So if you're interested in any of these other palettes, don't worry about them being ranked low. It's just because I had to rank them somewhere, and it hurts my soul because, like I said, they're all really nice palettes, and I feel bad because just because something is on the bottom doesn't mean that I wouldn't recommend it. But I guess we'll just go ahead and jump in because this is gonna be rough, but I feel like most of my reasonings here are just gonna be like what I'm feeling right now and like the moods that I'm in and what I want to reach for. So let's start on the bottom. I should have put this palette into my last ranking, but I totally forgot that I had this and I'd already put it aside somewhere else. But this is the Hindash Monochrome. What is this called? The Monochromance palette. If you haven't seen this palette, it looks like this. It's actually a really pretty color story. I love the concept of the kind of ombre-ish thingies going on here, but this formula just isn't really for me. This is very, I don't want to say subtle, but it is kind of subtle. It takes a long time to build up these shades. They are buildable to an extent, but I just didn't feel like I got the depth that I wanted with this palette. And even though it's super easy to work with, the formula is very beginner friendly. If you want something like this that you're not going to mess up your look with, you're not going to get any fallout. If you want something that is very buildable and easy to work with, like I said, I think you would like this palette. I like it as a face palette, but I just know myself that since it is more of an eyeshadow, I'm not going to reach for it because I have so many blushes that are so much easier to reach for than having an eyeshadow palette in front of me and having to like dip into this it's just too much work. Like I know myself, I'm not going to reach for this. It just ended up on the bottom because I just didn't have the best time with it. It's just not for me. Like I know it's for other people, but it's just not. It's not something that I'm going to be reaching for, and it makes me sad. I really wanted to like that palette. I think if I had gotten his original palette, I think I would have liked it more because I feel like the more neutrally shades and stuff would be easier maybe to maneuver in that way. I don't know, but I felt like there were darker shades in this first palette, and maybe I would have gotten along better with that one. Again, I'm not saying this is a bad palette. It's just not a formula that I really enjoyed. Next up is a palette that I feel bad putting it here, but this is mostly just a color story thing, and it's just not really what I've been drawn to lately, but this palette is so good, and this is the Glam Light and Frosted Flakes palette. Like, this palette is amazing. Like, it hurts me to put it here because I had so much fun playing with this, but I haven't been wanting to use these colors lately, and that is literally the only reason why I had to put this here. I think it's a really nice palette. If you like the color story, the formula is great. Like, just looking at it now, I'm like, I kind of do want to play with this palette. Like, I really do. It's a beautiful palette. And I didn't want to put it here, but I just felt like I couldn't really put it anywhere else either because I just like the color stories of the others a little bit more. Next palette in here is the Art Nouveau palette from Kyla. Now, you guys, if you've been around for a while, you know that their first ever palette, which was the Impressionism palette, ended up being a favorite of mine for such a long time. And then they came out with their sort of more bulky packaging, like their box packaging, and I wasn't the biggest fan of those palettes just because of their packaging. Now that they've gone back to like the slimmer packaging, I really like that. I love the color story of this palette. I think for the most part this performs well, but I did have some issues with a couple of the mattes, especially the purple. Like this purple here, it's just not very buildable, and it made it a little bit hard to work with, and the shimmers are just kind of okay, you know? I've said before, Kyla shimmers have never been a favorite of mine. Like, they're okay, they're totally fine. They look nice on the lid, they wear perfectly well. I don't have any problems with them. But they aren't the kind of shimmers that I reach for that get me excited. But I know if I use this palette and I use the shimmers, I'm going to love the look that I do. But I'm just not excited to use the palette, if that makes any sense. I think it's executed perfectly. I love the color story. I think it's really nice. but I just know myself that right now there are other shimmers that I would rather use over something like that. And that is why the next palette is ranked higher, because even though the color story of this palette, which is the Up Beauty Geodes palette, the color story on this is extremely neutral, but the shimmers in here are so beautiful. They're so sparkly and dimensional, and they look so good with these mattes, even though, like I said, they're quite neutral mattes, but oh my god, the formula in this is so good. If you're someone who loves neutrals, get this palette because you are going to have a blast. You're going to get the most beautiful, like, ethereal looks with some pops of color, and you're just going to have a great time because the formula from Up Beauty is amazing, and I really hope that they come out with some colorful mattes at some point because I think that they're going to kill it. Like, I think that they would do so well because their formula overall is fantastic, and I just can't wait to see what they do in the future. The next palette in my pile here is one that I kind of wanted to rank lower, but I also just had such a good time with this palette. I have done a video with this. I will link a couple of videos in the corner of some of the palettes that I've used here, but this is the Earthy palette from Beautybay. This palette is so pretty, but it's also so big. And the reason why it's not higher is simply because of the size. This easily could have been a 16 pan palette, and I wish that the 16 pan palette that they came out with in this range had a couple of these bottom two rows included in it because it was just a green palette, and I wanted this palette because of the combinations of the neutrals and the reds and the greens and the mints, because I thought that that was just so fun. So I had a really good time with this palette. I think the formula for the price, I think the formula is amazing. Is it my favorite formula of all time? No. I do think that it takes a little bit of work and a little bit of getting used to the formula to really be able to enjoy it because it's not the most buildable. It's not the easiest to work with. The shimmers can be a little bit tricky to get onto your eyes if you're not using a glitter primer. But overall, I really like Beautybay's formula because I find that for my makeup style and the way that I like to do my makeup, this works very well for me. But I can see some people maybe not getting along with it. I would say if you haven't tried Beautybay yet and you're interested in trying the brand, maybe get one of their smaller palettes first just to see how you like the formula before you commit to buying like one of the larger ones, because they are very affordable, and if you don't like it, it's just not that big of a deal. So let's move on. This is a palette that I had way more fun with than I kind of thought I would, and this is the new Creepy Cute 2 palette from Shroud Cosmetics. This palette is adorable, and I made some really fun just like pastel-y looks, and I pulled in some rhinestones, some graphic liners, and I just had a blast with this. I thought the looks came out so cool, and I'm just really happy I bought this palette because I can see myself reaching for this for all of these shades. I think they're beautiful. They performed really well. I love Shroud as a brand. I think that it's so, I don't know, it's just, I wasn't expecting them to come out with another Creepy Cute palette, and I love that. I love the little surprise aspect of it because they didn't really even sneak peek it very much until it was just like, hey, we're coming out with a Creepy Cute 2, here it is. And I think that is awesome. So I really like that palette. The next palette here is one that I haven't even made a video with, and I was going to, and I started filming a couple of looks. I'd filmed 2 looks, and then I'd kind of forgotten that I had those looks on my memory card, and my memory card was full, and I had edited everything else that I had on that memory card, and I was like, I'm just going to format my card, and so I deleted it on accident. So that's where we're at right now. But I can still tell you how I feel about this palette even though you haven't actually seen the looks. So this is the Norvina Volume 6 palette. I did end up buying this palette, and I wouldn't have if I knew that it had pressed glitters in it. When I got this palette and I realized it had pressed glitters, I was very sad because I don't like glitters, I don't trust glitters. So there are 2 pressed glitters in here. I don't think that one is. I think it's just these 2. So when I used this palette, I didn't use any of the shimmers because these 2 shimmers, just, I don't really care for them very much. So I only used the mattes, but I will say the mattes are amazing. If you want mattes that are reliable, I would probably compare this to the Blend Bunny formula because in a lot of ways they're very similar. I think that they just perform great. I had no problems with them at all. They're very pigmented, very buildable, very easy to work with. I think the color story in this is really nice. I think that this palette is better than what I was expecting, but I also hate that it has glitters in it. So I don't see myself using it as much as maybe I would have if it didn't have the glitters. I just wish that this was an all matte palette instead, honestly, because I feel like this top row is just kind of useless. Like the matte white is nice, but I just wish that these were, I don't know, mattes instead. I feel like, why these colors to go with the rest of the mattes? Like, they don't really, I don't know. I feel like they don't really go that well with the color story anyway. If you're only gonna have 3 or 4 shimmers in a palette, make it something that actually makes sense. Like, I feel like these shimmers don't really make sense. Like, I don't know, these greens, what am I gonna pair those with? I just don't really get it. Like, I don't get the color story choice with the shimmers, but I mean, whatever. I'm not the one who made this palette and it's not my vision, but I do think the quality is nice. And if you want to try Norvina, I would say definitely go for it. I think that you would like the formula a lot because it's really, really nice. Here is another palette that I just love this palette, but the reason why it ended up being a little bit lower than it would have been if it wasn't for this reason is because there is, when I made my video with this is the Sugar Drizzle Man I Love Frogs palette. When I made my video with this, I showed that the inside there was a little bit of like oil seepage coming out of some of these shadows, and I said that this is just the beginning, it is just gonna get worse. And you can see now, like all the way around these kind of top shades here, like there's liquid coming out of them, and it's just starting to look kind of gross. And when that happens to my palettes, I don't want to reach for them because it's not very appealing to look at, and it just looks kind of you know? I don't know, the shadows are really nice. Like, I kind of wish that it was magnetic so I depot them and put them into like an empty palette instead, because I really like the shades in it, but for that reason alone, because I can see the oil seepage, if this background was black, wouldn't be a problem. Like, that's what they should do if they're having that issue with these shadows. Make the background just black, because that way you're not going to see it. But the shadows in here are beautiful. I still had to rank it quite high because I do think it's a beautiful palette and the quality is amazing, except for this one shade right here, which is way too, actually it's not as creamy and liquidy now as it was when I first got it, probably because of all the liquid that's seeped out of it. And now it feels a little bit drier, which I guess that's a good thing. Man, that is amazing what a difference not having all that oil in that shadow made. Because now I feel like it's not going to crease as badly. So maybe I do need to try this again, but it is a beautiful palette. And I know that on their website now, they have said that palettes that do have this issue, they will sell for a discount. So if you're not someone who minds this, if you don't care if there's a little bit of oil seepage, it doesn't ruin the shadows at all. The shadows are totally fine still. If you don't mind the palette looking like this, you can get this for a discount, which I think is amazing. And I really appreciate them doing that because not everybody wants to spend a lot of money and have this issue with their shadows. I know I don't. So just wanted to put that out there. Of course, I will have like codes and stuff on the screen as you're seeing me talk about these palettes because I just don't want to mention it all the time. Next palette here is a palette that pleasantly surprised me so much, and I didn't think that I was going to like this palette as much as I did, but this is one of the newest palettes from Adept Cosmetics, and this is the Leather and Lace palette. Now, this is a sort of neutral palette for them, but I think the way they executed this is just so beautiful. It's so user-friendly in that you have like rows of monochromatic colors, but you can also mix them together. And the shimmer selection in here actually makes sense with the mattes, even though there's only 3. They go really nicely with the rest of the palette, and there's so many things you can do with this. If you like neutrals, if you like to dabble a bit in color, this is a great palette for you. And I would highly recommend it. I think the quality is amazing. And like I said, I really like the look that I did with this in my video. I've only used it once, but I did use most of the shades except for a couple of the neutrals in here. And I think that the quality is really, really nice. Next up is a palette that is just so adorable and is from a brand that I absolutely love. And this is the Menagerie Sugar High palette. This is so cute. This is like a spring palette, like the perfect spring palette. It is so colorful and so bright, but it still has a couple of grounding shades here. You have this shade that's sort of more of a brownish shade. If you wanted to do something not super colorful, you can easily use these 2 shades. And then you have one of the most amazing red shimmers that I've ever tried. Like, this is so metallic, and it's really hard to find metallic reds. And if you're looking for a red metallic, this is it. Like, this is beautiful. The mattes are wonderful. I don't have any problems with this palette at all. I think it's really, really nice. And I just love Menagerie as a brand. You guys know that. It's just one of my favorites. Another one of my favorites is Glamanatrix. I really wanted to put this palette higher, but it was so close at the top here because I love all of these palettes so much, and I just had to choose. And I feel like on any given day, this could have ended up either on top or in the number 4 spot, just depending on my mood. And right now, it just ended up a little bit lower simply because of this shade right here. This shade came broken for me and I had to press it back together, and right now it's extremely fragile, and it makes me feel like I can't really like bring this palette anywhere. I have to be really careful with this palette, and that's just really sad because I would have loved to bring this somewhere, but like it's just, oh, it's such a beautiful color too. But this is just really crumbly right now, and I feel like I said, I have to be really careful with it, but the color story is beautiful. The formulas in here are so nice, and I have nothing bad to say about this palette except I wish this shade was still intact. But other than that, it's so pretty, and I can't wait actually for their neutral palette to launch. I'm pretty sure they're sending it to me. I'm gonna rip out this sticker thing because I just felt like it. But I'm so excited for their neutral palette because it's not really that neutral, and it has a lot of depth in it, and the shimmers look incredible, and I think that I'm really gonna get along with this palette. So super excited for that one as well because I think I'm going to love that. Another palette here that is in the number 3 spot. This is a palette that I need to play with more. I wish I had more time to play with this, but this palette is so pretty. I've only used it twice, which is sad because I want to use it more. But this is the Heather Austin and Adept Cosmetics collab. But oh my god, look at this color story. This palette, like, videos do not do this palette any justice because it is so insanely beautiful. And the shimmers in here, I'm not sure if you can see the shifts kind of in the mirror, but like look how bright this shade is in the mirror up there, and this one, they're so pretty, and the formulas in here are just insane. Like I cannot, just look at that. It's not just, oh man, I need to use this palette more, and I feel like I could say that for so many of my palettes, but it's hard when you have probably, how many palettes do I think I have now? Somewhere between 150 and 200 palettes, I would say. I just can't use them all. Especially when I'm reviewing stuff, it's so hard to go back to palettes because I have so many, but I love my palettes nonetheless. Let's move on to the top 2. So in the number 2 spot is going to be the Solmona 2 palette from Unsai. This palette is just so good. I love this color story. It's so summery and so bright, but it also has very dark mattes in it, and it has some beautiful shimmers in it. I had such a blast playing with this palette. I loved all the looks that I did, and I love Unsai as a brand. I think they have a fantastic formula, and I have no complaints with this palette because I think it is absolutely stunning. The palette that is in the top spot is actually on my eyes today because it is one of the new Unearthly Cosmetics palettes, and this is the All I Ever Wanted 2 palette. I think this video has gone up already, but this is an all shimmer palette. I have one of the shimmers on my eyes today, and it is unbelievable. This is another one of those all shimmer palettes that I have just been raving about, and I love this kind of stuff right now. It just makes me so happy. It makes me able to play with all of the mattes that I don't get to normally play with if I'm reviewing a palette that has mattes, plus it lets me just play with this palette and have fun. I love the shimmers in here. I think that they are beautiful. There are so many different formulas. There are some that are flaky. There are some that are sparkly. There are some that are just very wet looking. Some that are metallic. They're all like duochromy. I love this. I love this shade up here as a face highlighter. It doesn't look like it would work for that, but oh my god, it is so beautiful. Like it reminds me of something that Kaleidos would make as a highlighter because it is just so pretty, and I love everything about this palette. And I feel like since these shimmers are similar to the ones from Sugar Drizzle, because this palette has a black background, if these do somehow end up like seeping with oil because they are a little too creamy or there's too much binder in them, you're not gonna see it. And I love that because, like I said, I just don't want to see that in my palettes because it's very off-putting, and maybe that is like a first world problem, but that's just how I feel. That is just how I feel, okay? But I think that this is just beautiful. I've had so much fun with this, and I can't wait to keep playing with it because I think that this is probably going to be in one of my top palettes of the year because I can see myself reaching for this over and over and over again because I love it. So that's going to be it for today's ranking video. Let me know if you were surprised by any of these. Is there any palette in here that you maybe want to see more with? I don't know if I'm going to have time, but I would still like to hear your thoughts and see what you are interested in because I want to make content that you want to see, obviously. But yeah, I'm so in love with all of these palettes. Like all the palettes except for the Hindash palette, great quality. If you want any of them, you're not going to be disappointed at all. So that's going to be it for today. If you want to see some other ranking videos, I of course have a playlist. I'll put that right there. And if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you in my next one. Bye.